In a previous video, linked below, I mentioned the time of transition we are currently in light of the bigger picture. Now let's look a bit deeper into what this time of transition is all about and how it affects you and all of humanity. I've also written an article about it called How to Navigate This Time of Transition and the Birth of a New Era, which is also linked in the info section below if you want to read more about it. My name is Bernhard Ganther. I'm a writer, psycho-spiritual coach, and host of the Cosmic Matrix podcast. You can find out more about the topics I share here relating to spirituality, psychology, self-work, esotericism, hyperdimensional realities, and much more on my website, veilofreality.com. We are in the midst of a death of an old era and the birth of a new one. What happens next is of critical importance because it will be the seed of the next cycle of this drama we call planet Earth. Therefore, we must understand what being in a transitionary period really means and how it affects us individually and collectively. People have asked me what this time of transition is about many times since I've referenced it in my work over the years. I first learned about the term time of transition around 2006 when I studied esoteric Christianity and the fourth way teachings by Boris Moraviev in his Gnosis trilogy. Longtime readers of my work know that I've quoted from these books extensively in the articles and essays I wrote over the years. Now, Moraviev writes about this time of transition in Gnosis, describing the shift of the ages based on the esoteric Christian tradition, which, by the way, is not to be confused with the mainstream dogmatic Christian religion that has become distorted, corrupted, really hijacked by occult hostile forces, and turned religion into a means for social control and soul harvesting. Now, according to Gnosis, human evolution after a long prehistoric period continues in a succession of 3 cycles. The cycle of the Father, the cycle of the Son, which we are currently in, and it's reaching its end, and lastly, the cycle of the Holy Spirit, which we are approaching. So, the time of transition we are currently in is the transitional period between the cycle of the Son and the cycle of the Holy Spirit, according to Gnosis. It's a very critical stage in humanity's esoteric and spiritual evolution. A successful transition, however, is not guaranteed. As I mentioned in my previous video, it's an opportunity, and it depends on a certain fraction of humanity to consciously engage in the great work to become individuated and spiritualized, to anchor the divine force, Holy Spirit, and help transmute the earth, getting it out of the clutch of the hostile anti-divine forces. A failure of this evolutionary process during this time of transition can result in a cataclysmic destruction, similar to what happened to ancient civilizations in previous cycles, such as Atlantis, and also symbolized in the biblical flood. The destruction would result from humanity not learning its lessons and the necessity to repeat the cycle, i.e. the divine pressing the ultimate great reset button. Now, this time of transition is not a short period within our current lifetime, but it will last 100 to 1,000 years. It depends on many unknown factors. So, very important, there's no need to get fixated on any specific dates, no end of the world fear porn scenarios, no specific predictions for who you are, meaning your level of being, soul potential, the sincere self-work you're engaged in, and learning your specific soul lessons to find the truth and essence of your being and what you do in alignment with your true nature, your true self and divine will in the now determines the future timeline, individually, in this lifetime, in future incarnations, and collectively. The accelerating energies will intensify during these coming times as the alchemical fire is expanding exponentially, fueled by the friction of seemingly opposing forces working through us and in the world. What is asked of us is way bigger than creating a new system of government or even just getting rid of government and only striving for sovereignty and decentralization externally. That's fine and good. However, the transition is about the necessity for a quantum leap in the evolution of consciousness and the need to spiritualize our being. It's about the inner alignment to the divine, transcending the mental egoic consciousness. Otherwise, everything will disintegrate again and again until we get the message. The old needs to die, or rather transmuted, before the new can emerge. Most of all, the death of the conditioned and programmed false personality that we still identify with and mistake for the true self. All our wounds and traumas accumulated over lifetimes need to be healed and transmuted via this internal alchemical process. This process results in the necessary disillusionment, which I've hinted at before, to ignite the fire within and grow the soul. of this often very difficult transformative process. So it's important to know that everyone is traumatized to varying degrees, but most people do not know that they are traumatized, but they have disassociated and live continuously in a trauma response of fight and flight, freeze or fawn. Ego identification in itself is a trauma response. The original wound, the fall from Eden, the illusory separation from God in our essence, hence everyone is traumatized. It's the wound of the original abandonment. From lead to gold, we aim to be reborn in the true self and eventually transcend and even transform death itself to embody the divine Gnostic being we're destined to become. No more half human, half animal, as we are now subjected to the lower nature desires, carnal love, disease, aging, and death, while the divine force will transform the earth as well. However, we can't skip any steps in this inner transformation and necessary work over lifetimes. As I mentioned many times before, it's very tempting to engage in spiritual bypassing without engaging in the necessary psychological work or getting lost in New Age fast food spirituality and overestimate your level of being, lying to yourself that you have already ascended to 5D or awakened in the true meaning of the word. Sri Aurobindo, who has incarnated during this time of transition 150 years ago, helped with his integral yoga and the divine revelation to establish the conditions on earth for the descent of what he calls his supramental consciousness. Similar to the esoteric Christian tradition, he also emphasized that we are in a transition, stating that man is a transitional being, he is not final. The step from man to Superman is the next approaching achievement in the Earth's evolution. It is inevitable because it is at once the intention of the inner spirit and the logic of nature's process. Now, this Superman Sri Aurobindo is referring to is not to be confused with Nietzsche's Superman, Übermensch. It is the divine Gnostic being, the destined future of humanity's evolution. It relates to what Muraviev referred to as the spiritualized new man in the era of the Holy Spirit. We are still far from this ideal and completed evolutionary process, so we need to understand that. We need to go through several stages until we can fully embody the supramental consciousness and transform the body, life, matter, and earth. According to Sri Aurobindo, we're currently in the age of mental man, a necessary step before we can move into the supramental age. However, the mind is also an instrument of the ignorance. It's very limited. It contributes to the darkness, suffering, and evil working through humanity. The hostile forces take it hostage, the Wetiko mind virus. And also the mind can never perceive gnosis, higher knowledge, and the divine or God. But a small spiritual elite has always been tirelessly working towards this great aim. Now, more and more people whose souls are ripe for the great work answer this higher call as well. And it may be the reason why you're watching this video or drawn to this content and relating knowledge. The planet is being infused with ever more dynamic energies of the divine force, as the dark and light polarities are increasing, creating more friction for those who are swimming in the current. Now, paradoxically and ironically, this friction and polarization is needed to ignite the evolutionary alchemical fire for transmutation. The light brings up everything that is not in alignment with who you truly are or who you think you are. All your triggers and projections will ignite like ammunition until you own the cause of them within you, stop externalizing and justifying your internal pain, get out of the rampant victim blame consciousness, which is a matrix program, and cut off the food source for the anti-divine occult hostile forces that play and control humans like puppets on strings attached, feeding off of all the projected emotional luge. Hence, it is essential to engage in the great work on all levels, physically, psychologically, intellectually, and spiritually. The fourfold approach of holistic self-work, as I call it, to clear the vessel, purify your being, and bring forth essence, your true soul being, as a transducer for divine will. The work is imperative and necessary to hold the divine force's frequency descending on this planet during this time of transition. However, not everyone is able, in their current incarnation and soul evolutionary state, to engage in the work, to embody and anchor these higher frequencies, and hence the necessity of this splitting of humanity, which I've written about before as well, and other esoteric traditions have talked about and hinted at. It's important to understand that this splitting is a natural process in light of the evolution of consciousness, since there are vastly different levels of being and soul lessons within 8 billion people on this planet, before all of humanity can be truly spiritualized in some distant future stage. But careful, it's not black and white, and many people have abused and misinterpreted this knowledge about different levels of being and soul potential within society to demonize others, falling into the trap of superiority, while overestimating their own level of being and soul embodiment and engaging in spiritual bypassing. The ego can easily hijack this knowledge. So the descent of the divine consciousness is also stirring up all the hostile forces in the world and the unconscious. It's their desperate attempt to interfere with the spiritualization of humanity, for the completion of the supramental descent into the earth consciousness and humanity would mean their destruction. We can obviously see this endgame currently of the dark side manifested on a basic 3D level, with all this psychological and economical war to enslave humanity under a totalitarian technocratic world government based on the Great Reset. However, only fighting evil externally and hoping that evil is defeated via arresting the bad guys at some point is illusory and childish wishful thinking, if it is not matched with the inner work in alignment to anchor the divine force and transmute yourself, humanity, and the earth. This process of ascent and descent during this time of transition is a destructive process that burns away everything false, exposes the lies within ourselves and in the world. At times, it's obviously not a comfortable process to say the least, but the only way out again is through. Our resistance to the process and attachment to our identifications, ego, and desires is proportional to the increasing suffering we may experience until there is a complete embodied surrender to the divine force. This work is a battle and it requires a warrior attitude. The ultimate question is, do you really want to wake up and initiate actual change? Or do you just want to be happy in your dream life, as Adyashanti once asked? That question is the most important one to sincerely contemplate during this time of transition. There's a possibility and potential for true awakening and transformation. Or, as Sri Aurobindo said, it may end in a crumbling up and disintegration, even in the necessity for repetition of the cycle of humanity, ending in a better attempt to solve the problem. We all signed up for this, so launching into victim and blame dynamics merely ensures that the matrix or cold forces keep using you as a food source. Anything that irritates you about another person, any shadow projections that you indulge in and triggered reactive responses are entry points for the matrix or cold forces to delay your progress and keep you in the prison of your own making. These are intense times, but also exciting times. So enjoy the ride, for there's much beauty and goodness in this world and in this reality. Once you're able to pierce through the cracks of your self-imposed prison and projections, and you realize that the matrix is in effect a mind program, a mind virus, which manifests through us into 3D reality. Once we truly understand and embody this, we will see that we can create a whole new world based on truth, love, beauty, and gnosis. Consistent meditative awareness and self-remembering will help us understand when and how this vertigo virus takes over our minds. The resulting mastery of your mind, emotions, and internal experience make you realize the true expansive meaning and simplicity of oneness, from darkness to light, from ignorance to truth. The divine is within us and all around us if we can only face the cracks in us and the wounds and traumas where we are still holding on to concepts on who we think we are. We must allow these projections to dissolve so that the light can pour in and so we become conscious transducers of the divine. But again, no steps can be skipped. Humility is needed so we don't fall into the trap of spiritual bypassing the necessary psychological work of individuation, which implies shadow integration. We need to fuse both together, psychological and spiritual work, the bottom-up, inside-out, and top-down approach, clearing the vessel within to anchor the divine from above, to spiritualize the being and give birth to the soul as the master in charge in alignment with divine will. There's nothing wrong with reality. That may be a triggering statement for some, but everything we are currently experiencing exists exactly to support our greatest evolution, if we choose to rise to answer the call. We're in the midst of a massive multidimensional spiritual evolutionary process, and we need to understand that our current point of evolution is far from final. Once again, the human being in its current form is a transitional being. We've been so focused on external progress, technological solutions, physical appearances, desires, pleasures, and industrial achievements that we've neglected the importance of our most inner life and progress, the development of our soul being. But even this phase of egoic materialistic mental consciousness has had its purpose, as we continue to spiral up and down, ascend and descend, until all and everything around us, in all directions and all matter, is spiritualized into its fullest potential. This process will bring up immense resistance from the hostile forces that have taken over humanity and are not giving up their grip that easily, right? As we can see during this endgame. However, any insistence of external action without the sincere inner work, aspiration, and surrender to the divine is not only limited, but futile in the end of the day. Nothing will change in any permanent way externally until we spiritualize our being in complete surrender to Spirit and the divine. When we open ourselves to the divine consciousness and force by allowing it to descend into us and gradually transform our mind, life, and body, it results in a true union with the divine, in our complete perfection of this terrestrial existence. The supramental divine consciousness is already exerting immense pressure on us to awaken into this new level of being for anyone engaging in the great work and able to perceive and anchor it. We are called to align with it and surrender to this force, or we will bust and disintegrate. In other words, it's not the time to escape the world any further, but to choose to embrace life, engage in it fully, and find the truth of our being. The adventure of this cosmic yoga towards our divinity continues as we enter the birth canal of our new human species. Embrace this adventure of consciousness consciously and full-heartedly. We still have a long way to go, and it's oftentimes a battle, but it's right here at the same time, and it depends on each one of us. Godspeed.